Madam Speaker.
Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would make a motion that we would take House File 4746 off the table.
Representative Demuth moves to take House File 4746 from the table. That is a non-debatable motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 4746, an act relating to labor, regulating transportation network companies. We're on that. I'll just report it again. Yeah.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Garofalo moves to amend House File number 4746. The second Grossman has amended. The amendment is coded A31.
The member from Dakota, the class of 2004, Representative Garofalo.
Yes, Madam Speaker, the greatest class in Minnesota legislative history. I don't. Do you have a list of speakers up there, or am I closing on this?
I think you're closing. I don't know if all these people still want to talk about it.
Okay, so
We have a great Nash amendment to get to. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, am I doing my closing or not? I don't. No.
Did more people want to speak on the, if you would like to be recognized on the Garofalo motion, please stand. Representative Johnson would like to speak. I'll come to you last.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, I am so thankful that Representative Garofalo caught this and had the amendment to strip this section out. What's really egregious is, as far as we know, the only nonprofit organization that can actually have a contract with the TNCs is one. That would be the one that we were talking about earlier. And what's interesting, that particular nonprofit had a total of $6.5 million earmarked for it earlier in 3 different bills. And when an article came out, they were all 3 were pulled. Now that organization has at least 40 times, or more than 40 times, been brought up with the Feeding Our Future fraud issue. I'm not saying that that organization is involved in it. We don't know. The investigation is still going on. But unfortunately, they are involved at some way, because many of the Feeding Our Futures programs were in their offices. We're over. But actually, we still don't know how many hundreds of $millions worth stolen through fraud. Now, what's also concerning is the word must in this bill. They must contract, and not the drivers, not the good local contractors that are driving the cars, but the TNC company must contract with them. Not may, must. I don't know of anywhere in statute where we have ordered a private company to contract with basically a specific nonprofit. And what's that nonprofit doing? It's acting as their labor union. So now we have a company that is actually paying for their labor union, and the members don't have to provide anything. Setting a precedence that is very dangerous for this state. Members, the only word that I can think of that describes it is absolutely bonkers. Members, support the Garofalo amendment. It's the right thing to do. It's the proper thing to do. And if that TNC company should want to provide through that nonprofit, they can. They don't have to. They could provide the services themselves as far as for dealing with some of the issues, like a lot of the other companies do. The drivers could hire a company or a nonprofit to take care of those issues. But the private company should not be paying for those services for their employees or the good independent contractors. Support the Garofalo amendment.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. And I would urge my colleagues across the aisle to, in fact, support the Garofalo amendment. And the reason I say that is, last night a lot of us were able to catch part of the press conference that was held when you announced the agreement had been reached, and it was a good time. It was a festive mood and a lot of congratulations, and you did a good job in averting the Lyft and Uber from leaving Minnesota, which would have not been a good thing. But I think what we've heard today in the testimony and the things we've heard today, if you do not accept this amendment, I think it casts kind of a shadow over your victory in reaching this agreement. It just takes a lot of the luster off the goodness of what you accomplished in getting the agreement down on paper. So again, I would urge you to think again, probably won't, but think again about accepting the amendment and really taking that shadow away from what should be a good, solid movement for you, a good, solid moment, and please look at accepting the Garofalo amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Morrison, Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. There's a couple of things that I've learned in my time here. One of those things is there are certain members, when they identify an issue, you should pay attention to it. Representative Garofalo is one of those. I've served with him on a number of committees, and when he identifies an issue, and it was funny in Ways and Means, when he said, "Members, I told you so, and look, here we are." This is one of those issues. But I look at it not necessarily for the issues it was raised. I'm going back to when I first came here, and I'm gonna, if you'll indulge me for just a minute, in Ways and Means, we talked a little bit about Section 8. I realize the amendment is not Section 8 of this bill, but in that we were talking about the relationship between a contractor and an employee. And it was stated in there that nothing in this bill would change that. However, as I started walking through this and looking further into this, I had that Columbo moment where I went, you know what? I missed the whole thing. I missed what's really going on here. What's really going on here, and I go back to my first year here, was when the majority party at that time was trying to unionize daycare workers. And they were trying to set up a collective bargaining for non-employees, for independent contractors and small business owners. Members, this is not the one issue you could talk about with the fraud all day long, but let's take this further to where it's really going. And now I see it. This is about establishing collective bargaining rights for non-employees. Members, if you look at the way that section that the Garofalo Amendment removes, it is specifically talking about organizations that would become advocacy groups. Okay? The other interesting thing here is, and I'm coming around to the fact, we talk about a ride-sharing company, but ultimately this is the Uber Lyft bill. This is about big companies, and it's about setting up those bargaining rights, and it's about setting up those unions. And if you start to look, and folks, I've done the 990s, I've looked at the contribution reports, and you look at the people who are contributing to members in this body. Start connecting the dots. Start connecting to where this is going. and I don't think it's going to matter which side you're on, we are going to have an issue of collective bargaining rights that are being pushed. One of the groups, and the Garofalo language removes the whole section about must be in Minnesota for 2 years. One of the groups conveniently is titled the Minnesota Uber Lyft Driver Association. It's not the Ride Sharing Association, it's the Minnesota Uber Lyft Driver Association. Conveniently enough established June 6th, 2022. The effective date for this bill is November 1st, 2024. The math works. And then if you look at the 990, oh, and by the way, if you read the About Us for the Minnesota Uber Lyft organization, their goal is not better pay. That's what we've all heard, right? Better pay for the drivers. And to those of you that are drivers, I would say you better start looking at who's behind this and the big money. Their number one goal is to extract payments to make their founders and the people associated with them more money. Their number one goal, shockingly, is our primary mission, not my words, is to unite the drivers in the fight for the right to collective bargaining. Are these employees or are they independent contractors? I sat in that seat over there. We had this very argument about collective bargaining rights for small businesses and independent contractors, which is what daycare providers were at the time. This is about getting into a collective bargaining union, getting dues, and then pushing those dues for political favors and political advocacy down the road. You can make the fraud arguments all you want, but start connecting the dots, folks. Go look at the campaign finance reports. Go look at the contributions. Go look at the 990s. And those of you that accepted those contributions, I'm not here to name names, but you're out there. Start looking at where this is going. Uber and Lyft and these organizations stand to make a fair amount of money off of this very cozy, intimate relationship that's about to be built. So members, the Garofalo Amendment is right on target for lots of reasons. And if you want to sit here, and if you're not going to go out and do a couple Google searches and tie these together, and you're going to vote to allow this type of cozy relationship to be created and to go down paths, this isn't good governance. This is exactly opposite of what we should be doing. And if you are a small ride-sharing company trying to get in the market, you're not getting in. You're absolutely not getting in. This is the doorstep of a monopoly to that. This is the doorstep to advocacy groups working behind the closed doors with these companies to block out other competitors, to block out other opportunities. This is building more and more of winners and losers that we should not be picking in Minnesota. Members, look very carefully at where this is going. This language, if we were to pass the Garofalo Amendment, this bill would pass, and then it would accomplish the many, many things that we've heard is trying to happen. With the Garofalo Amendment not taken, if this section stays in the bill, you are going to taint the entire process of what you're trying to accomplish. You are going to blemish the whole conversation about really trying to take care of the drivers and really trying to set up for them for a better opportunity. And you're going to blemish it on the nepotism and intimacy. You can go down the lobby. We've had bills in here about lobbyists and all. All of that is wrapped up here in a nice, very tightly wound ball of yarn that hidden inside there is a piece of coal. Members, this is a really, really bad section of the bill. This was not here as we saw it coming through all the processes. Why would this get added now? because this is what's done down here in the legislature late at night, last hour, behind doors. This is exactly what you do not want to have in this bill. Majority, I'm telling you, take this out. And then if you want to fight for it back in conference committee, go fight for it. But this is about things that this bill was never intended to be about. And look, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, fraud will be the least of the worry, as these very, very unfair business practices are going to be set up. Members, vote green on the Garofalo amendment.
The member from Wright, Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, here we go again. We don't even have 12 hours left in this session, and we've got this language that just popped up out of nowhere. We're doing things literally in the 11th hour, actually a little bit less than the 11th hour. We don't even have 11 hours left of session, and here we go again. We've had different iterations, different bills come through, Ways and Means and some other committees, but we never saw this language. Thank you, Representative Krisha, for pointing that out. And that's important because when you put language in here that says the TNC must contract with a driver's advocacy organization, and then as Representative Garofalo so eloquently pointed out, that there already is a connection to the Somali Community Resettlement Organization. Then to come to find out that they're all wrapped up in the Feeding Our Future scandal, only the biggest scandal in our nation's history with this type of fraud. And I remember watching Andy Lugar, so the Attorney General, Andy Lugar, U.S. Attorney, and I was fascinated because, you know, just like everything else, when you watch the live feed of press conferences, you get information that the media never tells you. I love doing that. I love to watch the raw footage of things. And I was watching the raw footage, and it was interesting because he said, well, we know that there's $500 million of fraud. We just can't prove it yet. At that moment in time, he said, well, we can prove $250 million of fraud. And then as things progressed, they added more, 50 million, 60 million. They haven't gotten all the way up to the 500 million, $500 million, members, of fraudulent money stolen right out of our taxpayers' pockets, right out of the mouths of children. This was supposed to feed children. It did none of that. So we're going to hitch our wagons to a corrupt organization. Now, is it named in the language? No, because we don't do that. We don't do that. We just sort of sprinkle in things that imply, we look at current relationships. Oh, but it's there. And you know, we started this conversation about this bill. It was interesting. And the author said, this bill is about justice. This bill is about justice. Well, let's talk about justice for just a minute. Let's talk about just one of the victims of this massive scandal and fraud feeding our futures. Because
Representative Rarick, can you relate your comments to the 831 amendment, please? Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Very clearly, I just thought I laid that groundwork, Madam Speaker, where I just said, and I know you've got a lot going on in the chamber, but I literally just said that the language of the bill is a must contract. So the TNCs must contract with a driver advocacy organization, and it's already been established that there is an existing relationship with a group called Somali Community Resettlement, and that existing relationship organization, as you have this on your desks already, members, from Representative Engen, it very clearly states in here that we've already tried to give this organization, Somali Community Resettlement Services, we've already tried to give them grants in the amount of $6.5 million, and that they were linked to the massive Feeding Our Future scandal. So I'm going to talk about one of those victims of the scandal.
Representative Rarick, that's fine as long as you make a connection to the A31 amendment.
So the A31 amendment would delete out the must contract with an organization that we've already established a path to an organization that has been embroiled in the Feeding Our Future scandal. So I have another article, and I was hoping it was going to get passed out, but maybe it hasn't yet. And this is dated February 26th of 24, so just a few months ago, when it was even after we already started session. And so this bill, the bill author said this is about justice, and I wanted to talk about, ever so briefly, a victim of this scandal. It's something that we haven't heard about a lot. In fact, like I said, this article just came out in February of this year, after we came into session. So the article talks about this couple that came here from China, an immigrant family that worked really, really hard. And the headline is called, "They're Cheating, an Immigrant Family Becomes a Casualty of the Feeding Our Futures Scandal, the Suspects with the Real Estate Ventures." So we have a person that is a business owner by the last name of Salad. And he was running his business in December of 2020. And he had said that he was cooking thousands of meals to feed the children. So in the article, it talks about that he received more than $16 million of reimbursements from the federal Feeding Our Futures program. And as that money was pouring in, he started to turn that into real estate investments in early 21. And one of those couples that got embroiled in his scheme was a couple from China. So on the second page, it says this was poor timing for Lai and Chen, a Chinese immigrant couple who were about to close on their first home. The couple had been pre-approved for a mortgage and were planning to move into a 4-bedroom home in March of 21. But their planned transactions never materialized. Instead, the family ended up paying for more money for a less stability and a haphazard contract for deed transaction. So this gentleman, they got $16 million fraudulently through this scandal, joined forces with a realtor and a lender, the article says. And they found a buyer for this home. So what he did is he went out and he bought a home in Blaine for $261,000 using a cashier's check from the very kitchen that he used to fraudulently extract $16 million, part of that $16 million. And he went and he bought a house for $261,000 out in Blaine. And then he did an immediate markup with a $30,000 markup. And this couple, through the help of their realtor, which is kind of a long story, I won't go into all that, but the realtor was one of the clients of one of the gentlemen of the couple. And so there was a long-standing relationship, and they thought they could trust the realtor. And the realtor connected this couple with a mortgage broker and this gentleman who had taken stolen funds to buy a house in Blaine. And then through a series of unfortunate events, which I won't go into, so I won't make this too long, Madam Speaker, but it's through a series of unfortunate events, convinced this couple to do a contract for deed. Except for the contract for deed was a 4-month, can you imagine a 4-month contract for deed with a balloon payment? Now, this couple said they didn't speak English very well, and they trusted the realtor because they had this established relationship with the realtor, and they were stuck. They knew that they would eventually have to refinance this mortgage, and so as they started that process, the new mortgage broker said, "Oh my gosh, do you know what trouble you're in?" Because what the gentleman that had already fraudulently taken $16 million from the children of this state was doing is that he was setting them up to fail. So he was offering them, so there were a whole bunch of circumstances where they couldn't get traditional financing because that fell through. That was a little bit orchestrated according to the complaint. And then said, hey, you know what, don't worry, you can move into that house, it's fine, I'll take care of you, you can do this contract for deed, it's fine, there'll be a balloon payment, but it's fine, don't worry about it. So what this gentleman was going to do was, after 4 months, in fact, they were in the process of foreclosing on this poor couple after they had forked out tens of thousands of dollars. And foreclosure was moving forward. But this new real estate agent with a new mortgage broker were able to actually help them to get traditional financing. But they were already underwater so much, and they had lost so much money that they got foreclosed on. Their American dream was shot to you know where. So if we're going to hitch our wagons to some organization that is tied to the Feeding Our Future scandal, we should talk about the victims of that scandal. And if we simply remove this language in this amendment that says that the TNCs must contract with this organization, we should take this language out. We should not be hitching our wagons anymore. And I know that Representative Engen already passed out this article. DFL lawmaker withdraws bills giving millions to nonprofits mentioned in the Feeding Our Futures case, and you can read it for yourself. But that was $6.5 million of grants that we were going to give them, and that was removed. We removed it once, we should do it again. I know they're not listed and they're not named in this language, but there certainly is a path to more victims. Please support the Garofalo amendment.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I'm going to ask some questions. And excuse me, I was down availing myself of the Thai festival food. And apparently I didn't know that Thai festival food that's considered sweet is not sweet. It's also spicy. So the Speaker has offered the use of Tums, and I will be using that, I can tell you. So if I'm getting on something that's already been covered, I apologize. But as a fan of garage logic, Joe always has the 48-hour rule before you make an assumption or you jump into a conclusion or tweet anything, and it saves me from getting in a lot of trouble, because by the time that 48 hours is usually expired, what everybody thought originally isn't what it was. And I will tell you that I have specifically done everything I could to not know anything about this Uber ride problem, because to me, I'm just disgusted that it's just another thing that we're socializing. We're socializing transportation, and government's taking over control of this. And I have relied on the good advice of Representative Garofalo and Representative Engen, who have been putting in the work on our side for this. So the Uber Lyft part of it doesn't concern me. What really does get my attention, though, is when we start talking about the fraud. And I don't, like I said, I'm ignorant of this company and this group, this nonprofit that we're talking about. But in reading the language in subdivision 4 and the subsequent Garofalo amendment, the investigator in me kicks in, and in all honesty, Representative Hassan, you talked about how there's this contract that they're already doing willfully. It's a private contract that's going on between two companies, or the company and the nonprofit. They're doing that on their own, but now we are mandating that. And when it first came up, Representative Garofalo gave some really good advice and said, actually read what we're going to talk about in this amendment. And as I read the amendment, it had a couple things that really stuck out to me, and I think I've got the answers. Representative Hudson and Engen and Garofalo have talked about it, but just so we're clear, because it's not clear to me because it doesn't say it in the language, would Representative Hassan yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Speaker. We're talking about these contracts, nonprofit groups, and help me understand, because under line 13.9, it says that the advocacy groups must provide at no cost to the driver, and it lists all these things that the driver can't be. So it looks like the drivers aren't being charged for this group, and there's no appropriation, and it didn't come through Ways and Means. So the members on my side of the aisle are talking about these big numbers and the fraud. Where's the money actually coming from that they're worried about? Who pays for these nonprofits? Because they're specifically a nonprofit, but there must be some money involved. So where does the money that they're talking about come from?
Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Currently, as it was echoed in this space earlier, Uber has a contract with a nonprofit. They are paying for that. Lyft has a contract with a nonprofit. They are paying for that. The reason why this is needed is there's too many drivers who do not speak the language, who do not understand how to navigate the system, that are deactivated and need support, and that's what this is for.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you for that answer, Representative Hassan, and that's kind of what I understood from the conversation and the other representatives that have had questions, and it goes to that concern. It's like, well, before there were two companies that had signed a private contract with these nonprofits, so they were able to negotiate their contracts, I assume, if they weren't happy with the rate they were paying or with the service that they were getting, or maybe if they weren't connecting with a wide enough variety of drivers. If we've got one specific ethnic group that's represented in the drivers, is there a different a group that's coming? And I think you talked about the fluent in the language. If there's a different language represented by some of these drivers that want to become contractors with the transportation network companies, that they could do that. They could change their contract. These companies could contract with other advocacy groups, I assume, but now we're going to mandate that, and we're going to tell them who and how much. But I don't see the who, the how, and how much. I don't see any directions. So we're mandating that they must contract, and I think Representative Garofalo kind of touched on it, but I just want to make sure that I don't see any guardrails in this. I don't see any percentages of the take. How is that contract going to be paid that we're forcing now by the order of the law to previous business, to entities that we used to be able to exist in the state without our intervention? Now we're intervening. Are there any guardrails on the fees, or how is that done? Is it an additional fee? Is it a percentage of the fees that are charged to the riders? Is it a subscription? How are these contracts going to be enforced? So, Representative Hassan, would you yield for that question?
She will yield. Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm hearing that people say that we don't dictate what private entities do, and I'm hearing that we should put guardrails on what private entities do. So I don't know which one is the case, but currently Uber and Lyft have contracted with two nonprofits. And this language was consulted with them. It was written with the drivers and DLI commissioner, and TNC signed off of it. So I don't see why we need to be explicit and say we're putting guardrails on how you spend your money and who you give it to and what you do with it. So I don't think that we should be that explicit. That's why it doesn't have any of that. Thank you.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the answer, Representative Hassan. But I think that's the issue, and I'll go back to it. Maybe I didn't say it clearly enough before, but those companies were engaged in a contract that they freely exercised out of their own volition. They decided that instead of directly working with these groups, that they would use this driver advocacy group to be like their middleman, like a union. But my question is, we're now mandating that. And if we're going to mandate that, what are the fees and who pays that and who is protecting these drivers? Will it be added to, is it a surcharge added to the total ride, or is it something that's going to be done? I don't see any guardrails, I don't see any protections for the drivers or the riders on what these fees would be. With nothing in here, you could do a contract that says we'll have a 50% surcharge that'll be passed on to the riders, or it could be passed on to the drivers. And I don't see a state agency that's going to oversee that. Let's get to that. Maybe you can answer that question. Would Representative Hassan yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Novotny.
Representative Hassan, is there any state agency that's going to oversee this contract, oversee these nonprofits? Now, we had the Department of Education that was supposed to be overseeing the Feeding Our Future money, and they did not the best work of the overseeing of that to make sure that there wasn't any fraud. So is there a state agency that's going to be overseeing this that is out of the loop and doesn't have a direct interest and will make sure that the drivers or the riders aren't being abused by these fees that we are forcing them to use this contract?
Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll just ground us in the fact that this is not a taxpayer's dollars. This is a private entities who are voluntarily doing this for their drivers. And in this bill, DLI has exclusive, is the exclusive enforcement agency. So I think if there was any issues, DLI will be the one that's overseeing this.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you for that answer, Representative Hassan and Madam Speaker. So Dolly is going to be overseeing it. And okay, my last question that I have, we had an extended discussion the other day on junk fees. Somewhere this is coming in, so we don't know what the fee will be. We don't know if there's any limitations on what the fee would be. We don't know if it's a surcharge or an add-on or treated like a tax. And I was going to ask Representative Greenman, I don't see she's here right now. So would Representative Hassan yield for one more question?
She will yield. I believe she said she'd yield. Yes. Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Speaker. And Representative Hassan, will there be any disclosing to the riders on their receipts what part of their contract is this, or we've got different groups that might have different numbers, because apparently, you know, you say we're not mandating a specific group do this. We're now mandating this contract. We're organizing this. Will we let the public know what this cost is? Is it an add-on? Is it a surcharge? Is it a flat fee? Representative Hassan, will we know? Is there a disclosure?
Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is already happening. So if you take Uber and Lyft, this is already happening. So it's not that we're inventing a new ways to add on to Uber and Lyft riders. Uber and Lyft are doing this because it's a good business practice, because they want to support their drivers. So we're not inventing something new. This is something that's already in existence.
Okay. Hold on. Representative Novotny.
Representative Hassan, I understand your point of responding, but that's nothing to do with the question that I'm asking. And it's such a distinction between the voluntary contract that we had, or not we, these companies and these organizations were doing before, any more than if there was one of these transportation network companies that wanted to have maintenance done on their building. Maybe they wanted to contract a custodial service to clean their office. Maybe they wanted someone to clean their windows. That would be up to the company and the service that was provided. And if they didn't like the service, if they didn't like what they were provided, or if they got a better deal from someone else, that would be up between two individual things and didn't involve the state. Can you understand that we are now we are mandating it, we are socializing these transportation ride shares, and now we're putting all this on them, and it looks like by the limitations that you're putting on for what organizations qualify to do this work, that they will have very limited choices. Okay, if I wanted to get my roof redone, I would have my choice between going to anywhere on the internet and finding a roof company. Representative Scott asked you how many different organizations provide the work that fit your matrix, and maybe I'm wrong, were any provided? She said there were thousands. I know that she said there were thousands, and you asked for 4. I didn't hear a response to the 4. Even if there's 4 that provide this service that meets your matrix, how much is it? How much is it? We don't know. We're forcing these companies to use what sounds like 1, but I'll be courteous, 4. They have to use this now, and we give no guidance. So if it's 1 or 2, and their only choice is to use this 1 or 2, and the contract is whatever they want it to be, that's a problem. And I'm not going to ask you to yield to the question because it sounds like I'm not going to get an answer. So I'm just going to say this Garofalo amendment is very important. And if you really want to protect your drivers, if you really want to protect the riders, we're already, 20% increase that we're going to have for riders? We're already raising the cost 20%. And now, instead of a voluntary contract that these TNCs can use, now we're forcing them. And when there's no choice, I got a feeling the fee will go up on that, but we have no protections. 1 or 2 choices will result from subdivision 4, line 1310 through 24 coming in. If we don't take the Garofalo amendment, in addition to the 20% we're already adding to the cost of these rideshare programs, we're going to have more. And you can't tell anyone in this chamber or in the public how much that will be or if they'll ever know. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Lyon, Representative Spudzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand in support of the A31, the Garofalo Amendment. I think that just means good governance. Dear legislators here in this body. Madam Speaker, would Representative Paul Anderson yield for question?
He will.
Representative Anderson, right now we've seen a good run in corn prices. Do you have a rough idea kind of where they're sitting right now for corn and soybeans on the general market?
Yeah, corn is about $4.50, $4.75 a bushel. Soybeans are around soybeans are around $11 a bushel.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Anderson, I appreciate that answer. Would you like those prices to go up? If Representative Anderson would yield for question, would you like those prices to go up or to go down through just general market forces?
Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Well, obviously, higher prices are better in terms of our cash flow and such, but again, they really have to follow supply and demand and be an honest price. You can't overproduce and expect a higher price. So a lot of it depends on the markets, and let the free market work, I say.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, just imagine Minnesota corn growers, Minnesota soybean growers, we're coming to this body to mandate through this legislative action a set price for corn and beans. While the legislature does mess with usage potentially of those commodities, we don't necessitate price. And on top of that, imagine this legislature was to say, you independent corn grower, you independent soybean grower, you must do your work through an organization such as the Minnesota Corn Growers Association or the Minnesota Soybeans Association, and ADM, Minnesota Soybean Crushers Association, any business that's buying grain, you must work through these associations, these groups, by state law, at state mandate, to do business. Well, there's currently a voluntary association between farmers and these associations. We would think it absolutely ridiculous to mandate not only price through state law, but also the associations in which we must keep. Imagine there was an association of laundromat owners. Independent businesses scattered. I mean, with a raise of hands, how many members have a laundromat in their district? I do. Imagine the state of Minnesota government, us 134 members, 67 members in the Senate, were to mandate the cost of laundering our clothes. If you're going to launder clothes in the state of Minnesota, you have to do it at this price. An association of laundromat owners forced to charge a certain price to launder the clothes in which we wear, the sheets in which we sleep, the ties in which we wear. Imagine. Where's the competition in that? Independent launderers being forced through state government to charge a certain price to launder. And then on top of that, if there's a laundering association that represents launderers, we'd be forced to have an association with a certain group, to deal with a certain group, if you were the sellers of Maytag or Whirlpool. If you want to sell a wash machine, you're going to have to go through this laundering association in order to get access to the launderers. Imagine the outrage of your constituents when the cost of washing their clothes was going up because of state-mandated laundering through organizations known for laundering. There would be absolute positive outrage in this body and outside of this chamber. Absolutely unbelievable. Madam Speaker's members, Representative Hassan said, you know what, this is just a minor, unimportant paragraph. Unimportant. From line 1310, I think to 13.8 is what the amendment, 18 is what the amendment removes. It was stated by the author of the bill or the amendment or the delete all, whatever we're calling it, that is unimportant. I want to discuss the other parts of justice, of fighting for a fair wage. Majority rule is not a fair wage, right? The people that should be negotiating the price of their ride should be between the person clicking the app on their phone saying, is this a price that I'm willing to pay? And the person offering it as independent businesses. If I'm looking to wash my clothes, I'm going to go to the one that does it cheapest and best. If someone has a review that every time I go into the laundromat, I miss a sock, or there's lint in the trap, or the doors are broken, or the floors are messy and slippery and sticky, right? You'd write a bad review. And guess what? In order to gain business, that laundromat would have to lower its price to get market share. But instead, what do? You know, I'm really a crappy laundromat owner. I don't like to clean up my stuff. I'm maybe not as good as laundering as the next guy. I'm going to come to the state laundromat and make sure that the folks that maybe offer a premium product as a premium service with clean cars or clean lint traps or never missing a sock, they have to charge the same as me. We've already seen what more expensive options have done to the market. They're out of business. They're out of business. They're not as adaptive. Maybe the technology they're utilizing isn't nearly as good. Maybe they're more expensive. Maybe when they have a corner on the market. In New York City, you used to have to buy a medallion that was probably about as big as this coffee cup to drive and give rides in the city of New York City. Do you think they gave those medallions away? No. They would have an auction open to the public and saying, you know what? Me, Chris Wazinski, would like to offer rides in my car that was also actually mandated by the city of what type of car it was. If you remember, it was like a 1955 Chevy-looking vehicle. I think it was called a Checker. And I would have to bid for that medallion. I remember reading articles that would set the price at $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 to go to government for a little gold medallion that gets bolted to the hood of the car so that I would have the right, the ability, the privilege of doing the best doggone job I can to deliver people from where they'd like to go, from where they've come. And oh, how far this legislature has come. Instead of taking the market and allowing the market to work when it comes to delivering people from where they are to where they want to go, we're saying, you know what? We don't like where the market's going. We don't like that people can get to where they are, to where they're going cheaper, more efficiently, and through private enterprise. St. Paul knows best once again. The 134 members of this body are about to decide how best an organization that's private as a business who they should talk to. And it's, don't lie, right? It's not 1,000 organizations that fit in this chapter, this paragraph. Representative Scott asked, could you name me 4? We had a half an hour or an hour and a half for that list of 4 to come out. And if it's gotten passed out, I missed it on my desk. Maybe I did miss it. But that's important. When we have an organization that has proven its inability to treat taxpayer resources with respect, with honesty, with transparency, and we have not only the FBI doing their work, but we see a dragging of their feet of the folks just down the hall and down the steps to prosecute folks that deserve prosecution. And this legislature, in its infinite wisdom, the 100 and so folks in this body, are seeing it upon themselves to say, you know what, let's double down. You know, we do that in education. In education, we spend about $8,000 or $9,000 for publicly subsidized students in rural schools that are successful. And when we have school districts that are doing a failing job, where the reading gap, the learning gap is getting wider and wider between people of color, we reward those failures with more money. And now that we've got this in writing on the House floor, we have an organization, while not named, but I think we all know, rather than say, you know what, maybe we should push the pause button until the investigation's done. You know what we should do? Let's make sure that private businesses is wrapped around the neck with a chain and hung and dropped into the ocean together when this group has failed us, failed taxpayers, failed transparency. And let's make sure that a private business is shackled to an organization that has failed taxpayers in the past. Maybe it's one of... What's that? Members, I'm upset. You know, I think it's interesting. While the folks supporting this amendment, or do not support this potential amendment, that support this bill, the whole bill that sits in front of us, are the folks that live near these drivers, near these businesses, near these places where we're brought from one place to the next. It's my constituents. It's members on this side of the body that are the ones paying these prices. If I live at between 494 and 694, how often am I using Uber and Lyft? It's when we come up to a state basketball tournament. It's when we come up to watch the Timberwolves, when we come to watch the Vikings, when we come up to support your organizations and groups and professional sports that we're already supporting through taxpayer dollars. Now, because of this bill and these amendments, we're going to have to pay more. My constituents are going to have to pay more to spend money in yours. Support the Garofalo amendment.
The member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And I do just want to highlight some important items in this amendment, and just kind of an overall posture to the degree that people are still listening. What is happening right now is that what has traditionally been a negotiation, a conflict, or a struggle between management, ownership, and unions now has a third set of organizations injecting itself. And these are advocacy nonprofits that in many ways are mimicking what has been the traditional union structure for collective bargaining. And in fact, these organizations are saying they want to collectively bargain. Now, unions, regardless of your opinion about them, have an infrastructure in place. They have laws, they have rules, they have elections, they have guidance to make sure that those relationships are on the up and up. They are prohibited from unethical conduct. The nonprofit infrastructure that we're seeing being created here has none of that. It has none of it. It's injecting itself in there and is being funded by the industries at hand. So what we have in front of us is what is going to be the template for Amazon drivers, FedEx drivers, anyone who's currently independent contractors, or I guess my colleague Representative Greenman would say Uber drivers are not independent contractors, but they're not employees. They're sort of this worker, they're in this worker, no, what's it called? No, when you're not in hell or you're not in heaven, what is it? Purgatory, purgatory, sorry. It's my last day, I don't care, whatever, sorry. Madam Speaker and Representative Hassan, I want to make sure that I understand the language in this bill. My understanding is that the law is actually going to be passed in the conference report. So if we were to adopt my amendment today, that actually doesn't matter. It's the language that's going to be in the conference report that's going to be adopted. And I guess I don't need to ask you to yield to that because I know the conference committee is meeting right now. But I want to highlight on multiple levels, members, why this should be a concern to you. This is a template going forward. It's really bad policy. The fact that there's gatekeeping going on to allow only certain people, certain existing organizations to be these driver advocacy organizations, this is something that those who vote in favor of this are going to regret someday. And you're going to want to keep an eye on this because it is taking what has been the problems we've been having in our public sector with fraud, and it's now moving into a private sector mandate that's going to fund fraud. And all of us should be concerned about that. Madam Speaker, with that, I'm going to withdraw my amendment. Thank you.
Representative Garofalo withdraws his amendment. There is an amendment at the desk.
Nash and Hortman move to amend House File Number 4746, the second and Grossman as amended. The amendment is coded RA24-008.
The Nash-Hortman amendment. Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Speaker Hortman, for co-authoring this amendment with me. Members, we need a little laugh. We need a little bit of levity. And I wanted to start us off by some things that we can all agree on, and I think we all do agree on. It is duck, duck, gray duck. We can agree on that. We can agree that lake life is worth the brutal winters that we put ourselves through. We can agree that Spam is delicious. We can agree that Honeycrisp apples are the greatest apple that has been grown in the state of Minnesota. We can agree, I hope, that tater tot hot dish is the greatest of all hot dishes. And I think we can agree today that the Senate is the single greatest argument for a unicameral that exists in the world. So with that, I offer, along with my friend, the Speaker, the RA24-008 that says, and it's great to read, notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, the Minnesota legislature shall suspend bicameral operations and undertake a single unicameral House operation, and that it is effective the day after enactment. So I want to provide some historical context. So if Representative Pawlowski would yield to a question, Madam Speaker.
He will yield. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Pawlowski, you have thought about this with great detail and gusto, and I know that you have been entangled with this under previous gubernatorial administrations. If you could illuminate for the body exactly why this is such an amazingly good idea, I would be eternally grateful, and I'm sure the Speaker would as well.
The member from Winona, Representative Pawlowski.
Representative Nash, Madam Speaker, I did not support the proposal, but I will tell you who did. Governor Jesse Ventura found this an amazingly good idea, and he incessantly supported it, in fact, even to going out into greater Minnesota. And it was at Rochester that he learned, to his chagrin, that the House would not even hear the unicameral proposal. Now, there were several of us, myself included, that got together to wonder why Jesse Ventura was so insistent on a unicameral legislature. And we decided that in a previous occupation, He perhaps had maybe one too many folding chairs hit to his forehead, and he had trouble counting to 2. And therefore, a unicameral legislature fit him perfectly. So when he was upset at the Rochester press conference, he called the members of the Minnesota House of Representatives gutless cowards. We immediately then had buttons produced with gutless coward, and when anyone met with Jesse Ventura, we wore the gutless coward button, which amazingly he did not find funny at all. Madam Speaker and Representative Nash, that's my story.
Representative Nash.
And thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, members, and I'm sure you know this, but we do have a member in the chamber as one of our sworn state representatives that has dabbled in both bodies. And if Representative Newton would yield to a question, Madam Speaker.
Representative Nash. He will yield. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Newton, I'm sure that you have thought as you sit here on the floor and you've deliberated back and forth about your time in both bodies. Would you agree with my last statement that the Senate is indeed the greatest case for the unicameral that has ever been made?
Representative Newton.
Thank you for the question, Representative Nash. And before I answer that, will you and your colleagues agree to stop burying us in paper? It's a little premature. You know, I'm old, but, you know, I don't want to be buried in paper. Representative Nash, it's interesting that you ask my colleague here and I to answer this, because we're sort of seen as the grumpy old men on the Muppet Show. You know, we discuss things over here, but this isn't one of them. I think, you know, given the cost of wigs and robes and ties and not being able to address colleagues in the chamber, that it's an idea we should look at, but I'm not in favor of it right now. Thank you.
Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure if we want to open this up for conversation.
Representative Erdahl would like to say a few words about your proposed
and
amendment.
Madam Speaker, I think that would be a fine thing to have a little conversation on this, because we do need to increase the amount of levity in the chamber right now.
The member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'm going to do something I really hate. Will Representative Nash yield for a question?
I think he will. Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Nash, how many members do you propose would be in this new unicameral body?
Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, given the genius of Cass Gilbert having designed this chamber the way he did and not wanting to incur extra expense, I think we're good with the number that we currently have.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And that leads to think what's going to happen with the other chamber, because this would then become the chamber. Would Representative Nash yield for that?
He will. Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I have lived in the state of Nebraska, and I did visit the Capitol, and they use their House chamber for storage. So I think that would make a great rumpus room, or we could store some chairs over there. Maybe we could, hang up wigs on the wall and look at them fondly. But I think that we could expand over there to store some of the things that we might need to store.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Nash. I think that when we were doing the restoration of the Capitol, the question of what to do with the Senate often came up. And there are a lot of House members who had suggestions on where the Senate should go. I'm thinking, maybe, I like your idea of rumpus room or whatever, turn it into a museum. The history being preserved, maybe bring back old senators and have them sit there. Thank you.
Representative Nash.
Madam Speaker, on the outside chance that we are overcome with joy and mirth and an inclination to push a green button, which causes more problems, I think, than we may want to entertain at this moment. I'm going to withdraw this amendment. But I will encourage every member to share with their senator just the fun that we had today here at the Minnesota Capitol.
Representative Nash withdraws the amendment. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Engen moves to amend House File Number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A25.
We'll just chill for a second, see if he's near.
We're good at that.
You can't withdraw if he's not here.
Right, he's not here, yeah.
Yeah, you can't withdraw it.
Or somebody can carry it and pick it up.
Hi, ma'am. Hi. Should I dispose of this amendment problem I created? I didn't realize he wasn't here. The member from Anoka, Representative Engen, to your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't know who is more frantic right now, me or the Senate, but we'll get through this here. So the 825 amendment I'm actually bringing up because it does the work that we intended to do with this overall bill. We have preemption currently in the language of the bill, but only for the per mile and per minute wage rates. What we don't have it for is for yanking a license. If a transportation network company doesn't, let's say, contract with one of these fraudulent organizations, well, then their license might be yanked. That's wrong. We shouldn't be telling a private business that they have to be contracting with fraudulent organizations. And if they don't, well, then we're just going to yank your license. So I would urge members to support the 825, and I would request a roll call, Madam Speaker.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please vote green.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Preemption is already included in the bill. And we included the things that we need to preempt on localities. We still want to give localities local control, so taking everything away from them so then they're not able to do licensing is not ideal. So vote red, please. Thank you.
Further discussion? There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the Representative Engen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would say this, Representative Hassan, being told that you cannot operate and your license can be revoked because you don't comply with the subdivision 4 in the bill, contracting with a driver advocacy organization that's tied to fraud, that isn't preemption. These local units of government can mandate and bully around these organizations, Uber and Lyft, simply because they feel as if they're not going along with the criminal behavior that we've identified as fraud. So we need this preemption. To not do so would be irresponsible of us, and that's why I would urge a green vote. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, no.
Carol, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 61 yeas and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Schumacher moves to amend House Law number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A27.
I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is not my amendment, but fortunately I have been studying the amendments, and this one is actually particularly important when we're talking about this Uber Lyft language. And this one is specifically regarding enactment of the language being held until the Department of Human Services can ensure that nothing in this bill will reduce mobility access for individuals with disabilities. One thing we really discovered throughout this debate on Uber Lyft is that there are a lot of underserved people who really rely on these rideshare apps for very basic needs. And one of those groups is our disability community, who has a difficult time, perhaps they don't have the ability to drive themselves, or it doesn't make sense for them to own their own vehicles. Whatever the case may be, there's a large segment of our disability community that makes use of rideshare services in the state. And we need to make sure that nothing we do in the process of enacting language, enacting law, is going to hurt those communities. We need to make sure that nothing in this bill is going to impact access or reduce mobility for individuals with disabilities. And Madam Speaker, I'd request a roll call vote on this.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for supporting that roll call, and I would request a green vote.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I really want to say that we did not forget the disability communities. We actually have 91 cents extra for drivers who have cars that are wheelchair accessible. But I will say this is a good amendment. Vote green.
Further discussion. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And would Representative Hassan yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hassan. I appreciate that. I legitimately do, and I mean, I know that there are some things regarding access, but this one is really important to me. This deals in the human services space. These are exactly the issues that I like to work on, and I just want to make sure when this goes into conference, can you just let us know, give us some confidence that you will fight to keep this provision in conference and make sure that we're protecting individuals with disabilities?
Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Rep. New Brindley, I care about the communities with disabilities, and I'm accepting this as a friendly amendment. So while I'm not guaranteeing anything, I say vote green, and we'll see what happens.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that it's a friendly amendment. We'll see what happens is a little concerning. That doesn't give a ton of confidence that we'll actually try to make sure that we are protecting people with disabilities and the access they have to mobility, frankly. I wish we had a stronger answer, but I would appreciate a green vote, folks.
Further discussion. There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll.
What are we talking about? Speaker votes aye. Okay, say the speaker votes aye. No, record it.
Speaker votes aye.
Okay. So 131 did.
There being 131 yeas and 0 nay, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Nadeau moves to amend House Law number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A26.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Nadeau.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, this is very similar to the one we just passed. This one protects transit-dependent people, those people that don't have cars. Once again, they could be people with disabilities that are trying to assess jobs or access jobs. And what it does is it ensures that the enactment date for this, the effective date, is there. It goes into effect so long as the commissioners from Health and Deed ensure that the impacts that this bill has is not going to reduce the ability for transit-dependent populations to access services. And I would hope we would have a green vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Doig, I'll tell the body to vote yes on this amendment so we can move ahead. So thank you.
Further discussion to the Nadeau amendment. I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Nadeau.
Vote green. Thank you.
All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kresha moves to amend House File number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A28.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a moment as I look for it. Madam Speaker, thank you. And members, we had a long discussion about ride sharing and the accessibility that's occurring for our students. And so what this amendment does is the enactment is prohibited unless the Commissioner of Education determines the enactment will reduce access to schools and education for children. If you look across the country, the ride sharing is becoming a critical part of what students, homeless students, students with disabilities, and students in general are using this, especially with the extreme shortage that we have for bus drivers. So with that, members, I would just simply ask for your support and a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please vote green.
Further discussion to the Kresha amendment. Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a great amendment.
The clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carol.
There you go.
Carol, I.
Carol, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 131 yeas and 0 nays, the motion is, what is the motion? The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Niska moves to amend House File Number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded RA 24-011.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The RA 24011 amendment is just a kind of simple cross-reference amendment to make sure that we are appropriately allowing for enforcement of the non-discrimination provisions in the underlying bill. So if you look at the Hassan amendment that's now incorporated into the bill on page 15, there's a new provision of statute 181C.06 that prohibits discrimination and provides that there's protections for TNC drivers against discrimination on the basis of a number of the protected classifications that we also have in the Human Rights Act. And there are some cross-references from there to the Minnesota Human Rights Act, as well as providing for remedies that are also provided under the Human Rights Act through the Department of Human Rights. The confusion this creates is that the rest of the bill is enforced by the Department of Labor and Industry, the rest of this regulatory scheme. And so I thought it would be helpful to clarify in the Department of Human Rights the provision in 363A. So 363A is referenced here in 181C.06, but in 363A.06 there's a provision about the commissioner's powers, and in particular in paragraph 19 of 363A.06 subdivision 1, there's a reference to cooperating. It gives the Commissioner of Human Rights the power to cooperate and consult with the Commissioner of Labor and Industry regarding the investigation of violations of and resolution of complaints regarding section 363A.06 or .08 subdivision 7, which is a pensions provision. And so just to clarify that the Commissioner of Human Rights and the Commissioner of Labor and Industry will cooperate regarding these discrimination provisions. The A24011 adds 181C.06 to that provision in order to make sure that those things work together, and I ask for member support.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Nishka moves to amend the Nishka amendment to House File Number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded RA 24-012.
I recognize the author of the amendment to the amendment, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the RA 24-012 then adds some additional language to the paragraph right below. So the previous or the underlying amendment is adding language to paragraph 19. This amendment would be adding language to paragraph 20. And paragraph 20 references the Commissioner's analysis of civil rights trends. And this was language that was enacted last year in the Judiciary and Public Safety Omnibus Bill, in which the body funded money to the Department of Human Rights and also gave the Department of Human Rights money or the power to have an analysis of civil rights trends. I'm sure everyone here remembers there was quite a robust discussion about that provision here, about whether that created a situation where there would be a speech surveillance database at the Department of Human Rights. There was some video about that went out and caused quite a bit of attention to be drawn towards the state of Minnesota. And following that floor debate, myself and Representative Scott had a meeting with Commissioner Lucero and Chair Becker-Finn on May 11th of 2023, in which Commissioner Lucero said that that had been fixed in the conference committee report, that there wasn't going to be a database, that the questions that were asked in that floor debate were spot on, and that the department did not want to collect the information. The problem is that, I would wonder if Representative Scott would yield if she's here.
She will yield. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Scott, I was wondering if you, I remember you being at that meeting with Commissioner Lucero and Chair Becker-Finn, and was wondering if you could share your recollection from that meeting.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Niska. Yeah, it was a very interesting meeting. I remember going over the governor's budget requests, and the governor's budget requests, he submits those, or the commissioners from each department submit those requests to the governor's office for what they think they'll need for the upcoming biennium. And there was a line item in there for this database, and so we were asking questions about that. And the commissioner informed us that that is not their intention. She didn't say it, but almost said, we didn't ask for that. But even though that the request came from their office. So, but she said, absolutely, we're not going to do that. That's not our plan.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Scott, for confirming my recollection of that meeting. What we were told in that meeting was that there was going to be no database at the Department of Human Rights. The problem is then the conference committee report, which was passed and did fund money to provide for a speech database at the Department of Human Rights, and did add this language to paragraph 20 of 363A.06 subdivision 1 that says that the department will analyze civil rights trends pursuant to this chapter, but it doesn't create any limitation on what the department could collect. So the A24 or RA 24-011 just very simply adds what I think should be some pretty non-controversial language to that provision. It says, notwithstanding the foregoing or any other provision of law, the Department of Human Rights shall not directly or indirectly maintain in any collection or database any incidents of protected speech, nor shall the department directly or indirectly offer any reward for the reporting of any incidents of protected speech. There was a proposal in the state of Washington, a similar bias registry. It ended up being stripped out, but there was a reward being offered. And then the amendment defines the term protected speech as shall include any exercise of the right of freedom of speech or of the press, the right to petition or assemble or petition, or the right of association guaranteed by the United States Constitution or the Minnesota Constitution. That language I borrowed directly from the UPEPA law that we passed unanimously off this floor a few months back. That was also included in the Judiciary and Public Safety Omnibus Bill that the conference committee report that we just passed. So I think this should be fairly uncontroversial for us to support, but Madam Speaker, I do request a roll call.
Roll call has been requested. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Discussion. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please vote green.
Further discussion to the Niska amendment. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Noor. I hope you'll light up the board green. Thanks.
The clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
There you go.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 131 yeas and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment to the amendment is adopted. To the underlying amendment, Representative Niska.
Thank you. I appreciate the all-green board. I hope that that means we're also going to take the underlying amendment and fight for it in conference committee.
Further discussion to the NISCA amendment as amended. The member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please vote yes.
Further discussion. There being no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment as amended is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kresha moves to amend House File Number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded RA24-013.
I recognize the member from Morrison, the author of the amendment, Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And 1 second while I find that amendment. Thank you, Representative Rarick. It's the A13. There we go. Madam Speaker and members, I would recommend, oh, this is why I'm carrying. Okay, Madam Speaker, remember, the A13 is a good amendment, and I'll just, as long as we're going here nice and easily, I'll just request a roll call and a green vote.
Roll call has been requested. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Please vote green.
Further discussion. The clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 yeas and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Scott moves to amend House File Number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A42.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What the A42 does is when we're talking in reference to the sections on this nonprofit on page 13, line 24, we're going to insert some language that says a board member or an employee of the driver advocacy organization, the nonprofit, contracted under this subdivision is prohibited from donating to a state legislator. And members, we've been doing some digging and we've found some information that is a little bit troubling. And so at the very least, a nonprofit in this capacity should not be donating to legislative campaigns. And I urge a member's support and ask for a roll call.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Please vote green.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Noor. I really appreciate the support for this amendment, especially because we found some really troubling things. So, yeah, let's just light the board up green. Appreciate it.
Point of personal inquiry, Madam Speaker.
State your point of personal inquiry.
Madam Speaker, the Transportation Conference Committee has wrapped up, and this bill is in the conference committee. So I'm wondering how it is possible that we are going to pass a bill that has already passed a conference committee.
Representative Franzen, my apologies. Can you repeat your question?
So my question to you is, we have a conference committee that is wrapped up, and this Uber Lyft bill is in the conference committee that is wrapped up. So we are on a bill, doing the good work, doing thorough work, vetting it with amendments, trying to make sure that this is a legit operational program, and yet the bill that we will be either adopting or not adopting soon in this committee already has the language that the majority party wants passed.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be happy to respond to the question. So the request last night from the minority was that we pass this bill to establish a House provision. That is not necessary. The underlying bill, it would be germane to, but we decided to do that because that was a request from the minority, and so that has been the debate we've been engaging in. I'll note that a number of the amendments that we filed and debated were totally unrelated to the bill and not germane, and we have been on this bill for several hours. If the members would like to get to a vote for this bill, then we can get to that vote, and I would encourage us to do that.
Representative Franzen, any follow-up? Further discussion to the Scott Amendment. Oh, Nora already said no. Nora already said it. There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 yeas and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend House Law number 4746 to second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded RA 24-018.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm waiting for it to pop up on the board to make sure I have the right one. 018.
It's 018.
That is correct, Representative Brindley. We are on the 018 amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to make sure I was on the right one. I appreciate that. So, members, this amendment would add an automatic inflator to the rates that are laid out in this underlying bill. I know, maybe a little odd that a Republican is suggesting an automatic inflator. However, we have this new trend in the legislature. We have this new trend of groups like rideshare drivers or the Minnesota Nurses Association using the legislature to intervene in labor disputes, in disputes that should be worked out elsewhere. And frankly, these disputes are becoming tiresome and increasingly time-consuming and destructive to the legislative process. Yesterday, a single senator took this building hostage over a labor dispute.
Madam Speaker.
For what purpose do you rise?
Mason's 124, personalities and debate and motives. Taking a senator taking hostage.
Members, I'd like to remind us that we must not impugn the characters of members of the body. If we could confine our remarks. Thank you. Representative Brindley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Once again, yesterday this building was shut down. The Senate took no action for most of the day. And frankly, the same thing happened last year. The exact same thing happened last year. A single senator disrupted the proceedings of the entire legislature over a labor dispute. What happens if this trend continues? What other groups are we going to cater to? What other groups are we going to manage their labor disputes for? I mean, we have language in the health bill right now because the Hennepin County Board is going to take over a hospital that they are not prepared to do. This idea that we have all of these groups who are getting more and more and more and more aggressive with using the legislative process to manage their labor disputes is incredibly problematic. It's incredibly problematic, and we need to make sure that we do everything we can to try to halt that. So the goal of this bill is to try to at least create a situation where we're not coming back next year. Because guess what? When you put real dollars in legislation, that gets outdated real quickly. As soon as the clean car standards come fully into effect in Minnesota, these real dollars become irrelevant very quickly, and here we are again, year after year after year. Members, this is not a good way to do business. It is not a good way to do business. What you have produced here in this underlying bill, this underlying DE, what you have produced is a temporary fix. When you put real dollars into a bill, you have created a temporary fix. And so how often, is it going to be every year, every 2 years, every 4 years? How often are we going to be held hostage by companies who want us to do their bidding? Or by labor groups who want us to do their bidding? Because that is what's happening here. That is what is happening in the underlying bill, and frankly, with this issue more broadly. It's what's happening. We've been held hostage by a small group of people and here we are now, I can't see the clock very well, with how many hours left, and this is what we're doing. And this is what we're doing. Although, as Representative Franson pointed out, we're not actually vetting a bill right now, as it turns out. That's unfortunate. I do think there's some stuff that we should still get on the record, so it's a valuable conversation. We're not actually vetting a bill. The legislature, Democrats have completely bypassed the vetting process. We're not vetting this. Now we're just making points because the Democrats took the original bill and just dropped it into a conference committee. We didn't actually vet it. That's what we're doing now. So I love this little game we play now. Every vote, just vote green, just vote green, just vote green. Because it doesn't matter. We don't have to worry about stripping it out in conference. We don't have to worry about proper process. We don't have to worry about proper vetting. Doesn't matter. because we've already dropped it into a conference bill. But Madam Speaker, I would like to be on the record for this at any rate. I'd like to request a roll call vote on this.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
And I'll be honest, members, with this amendment, I'm not asking for a specific vote. Vote your conscience on this. Frankly, if you do want to prevent the legislature managing labor disputes every year between rideshare companies and their drivers, you might want to vote yes on this. Or you might want to vote yes on this if you think that rideshare drivers just should receive increases every year. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote, because in principle, I don't love actually forcing these mandates on companies, and I don't think it's the best way to do business. But frankly, we've abandoned the best way to do business. This is what we do now in the legislature. We manage labor disputes. And it's taking up an increasingly significant share of our time and resources here. And it's nonsense. We got to figure out a way to make sure this doesn't happen.
Discussion to the New Brindley Amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Vote green.
Further discussion to the author of the amendment, Representative New Brindley. No further discussion. The clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 72 yeas and 57 nay, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Franzen moves to amend House File Number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A44.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Douglas, Representative Franzen.
Hi, thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, hi, yes, hello. So the A44 amendment would just simply, we are going to mandate that the TNC must use 25% of the funds expended under this division for sexual assault prevention training purposes. Madam Speaker and members, I was just doing a little search on the sexual assault, and wouldn't you know, 3 days ago, there is a law firm actually that is asking if anybody has been sexually assaulted by Uber and Lyft to contact them in order to solve some justice issues that they have had. So in this, this law firm claims that in 2022, Uber released a safety report that revealed 3,824 sexual assaults occurred during trips between 2019 and 2020. A similar report from Lyft found over 4,000 sexual assaults occurred from 2017 to 2019. Members, one sexual assault is one too many. So this amendment is extremely simple. Let's provide a sexual assault prevention training to the drivers, and let's get a roll call too, Madam Speaker.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, please vote yes.
Discussion to the amendment. I recognize the author from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a good amendment. I do agree that one sexual assault is one too many. Vote green.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative, I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Franson, for this amendment. Particularly with rideshare drivers, there's a real relationship of trust when you get into someone's vehicle and you don't know that person. And we want to make sure that anyone getting into one of these vehicles can feel safe and know that the person who they're riding with has received sexual assault prevention training. I can't imagine actually too many more important things that we could ensure happens. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness in making sure that this organization at least has some vetting, some standard, some important training that they provide, and not just an advocacy organization. They should actually do something that's going to help protect rideshare drivers as well. So thank you for the amendment, and I will certainly be voting yes on it.
Further discussion to the Franson amendment. To the author of the amendment, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll. Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 124 yeas and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend House File Number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded RA24-019.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So we spent some time already talking about Subdivision 4, the driver advocacy organization. And what I want to point out, we had an opportunity to just fix it and get rid of this language. That we've certainly thoroughly discussed how problematic the language is overall. However, since we didn't get rid of it, I want to point out that in this language, there are only 2 requirements of this driver advocacy organization, other than, of course, it must be a nonprofit. It must be a nonprofit. It must have been established for at least 2 years and continuously operating in Minnesota, and it must be capable of providing culturally competent representation. Those are literally the only 2 requirements of this organization. And as we've already discussed, there is only one organization that we currently know about that has currently been named. Maybe there's thousands. I don't know, Representative Scott really tried to get at that, but we couldn't get another name. So we only know right now of one organization that fits the bill. We only know of one. However, I still welcome, I hope folks tell us more. I would love to hear more. But right now, we only know of one. And of that one, We know that that one has been listed, what, 43 times in the Feeding Our Future indictment? That's problematic. So this amendment, the A20 amendment, would add that not only do they just need to exist for 2 years and be able to provide culturally competent representation, they actually have to meet some standards. Because we put a lot of standards in place for giving grants to nonprofits. Now we're forcing a company to give money to a nonprofit. They should at least have to follow the same standards. Oh, I'm sorry. A19? Hold on.
We're on the A19, Representative
We're moving
Brindley.
quick. Oh, this is a good one too. Good news, this is a good one too. So this one, okay, let's go to the A19 amendment. And Madam Speaker, I'd request a roll call on this vote.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for clearing up the confusion. I didn't realize I had 2 more amendments left, but I thought I just had the one. Okay, so this one is actually really important because was it just yesterday? Just last, I don't know, sometime this week, we passed legislation about misclassification of workers. And that's been a real point of contention, particularly regarding rideshare drivers and the TNCs. This has been a real point of contention. And frankly, part of the problem is that these rideshare drivers still want all of the benefits of being an independent contractor, but they also want all the benefits of being an employee. And they just want us to intervene in their labor disputes. So what this amendment does, it ensures that for these rideshare drivers, since we are treating them differently, we are managing their labor disputes, they are not subject to misclassification. They're not subject to the new misclassification statute. We're treating them differently. We are handling their labor disputes, so they should be treated differently. We want to make sure that we all understand that these folks do not fall under misclassification. They will not be considered employees of rideshare companies. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative New Brindley. It's no secret that the rideshare companies across the country have been pushing for just your language, just your amendment that codifies rideshare drivers as independent contractors, because they would prefer to have folks work for them and not pay the cost of employment. It's a sweet deal if you don't have to pay into the UI trust fund, if you don't have to pay overtime pay, if you don't have to follow discrimination laws, if you don't have to pay for earned, safe, and sick, pay family medical leave, or pay the share of taxes that you would have to pay if you had employees. In Minnesota, and as we talked about, we have 4 different tests. If you read the OLA's report, there's pretty good examples. And we have not had litigation yet to determine which classification they stand. And as we talked about, as Representative Garofalo talked about, maybe we could call that purgatory. But what this bill does is say that this chapter, this bill, shall not be construed to determine whether a TNC driver is an employee. And what that means is that it is the status quo of our current law. And the last thing I will say is, since we didn't have as full a robust discussion as I or many of you would have wanted to have on every line of the 30-page my misclassification bill. But one thing we did talk about in committee and on this House floor is we did not actually change the misclassification test for everything outside of construction. And so the law tomorrow on the test tomorrow for gig workers will be the test we had yesterday. So members, I'd ask you to vote no.
Discussion to the New Brindley Amendment. I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Greenman. You know, I found this funny thing. I was looking at the calendar of the day and the amendments page, and we have all of our amendments loaded up for House File 4444. Maybe we're going to get there today. Maybe we're going to get there today. Well, members, here we have an opportunity to kind of right the ship a little bit and make sure that we're keeping some key priorities available, the flexibility that's available for folks who work with or in the TNC realm. I must say I love using ride-sharing services at the times at which I need them. Just been fantastic utility, especially around the Twin Cities metro area. And what I have to say is, even from the conversations that we've had just this week when we were moving about the city of St. Paul, the conversations in the car with the drivers, they appreciate the flexibility that being an independent contractor has created, and that's why Representative New Brindley's point is prudent. And I think that you literally see that, and you hear that when you talk to the drivers. We need to be as inclusive as possible of the range of voices that are heard within the driving community. It's not just one group of people in this, and we should take into account the people who, frankly, are out working right now and not sitting inside the halls of the Capitol today. We should take into account the people who want the flexibility and they want to be able to do this work. And frankly, I think that Representative New Brindley's amendment here would help us, would help get us to a place of a little bit more workability in general on this topic. So, being an independent contractor helps each of those people be more flexible with the needs of their family, with the needs of their schedule, whatever other work responsibilities and engagements they may have. I think that's one of the greatest utilities that's found in being one of these drivers, and something that I certainly appreciate. I think that at some point in the future, should Uber and Lyft remain in Minnesota, I might give it a stab myself, and I have friends of mine who are also considering joining the force of drivers in Minnesota. So that's why I think that we should stick with and work with this New Brindley amendment to this bill today. In addition to the earlier conversations had about the A31 amendment that was mentioned earlier, and the concern of the engagement of one specific nonprofit organization too. I think that some of these same principles apply the same on this conversation. And I'm just gonna, I didn't speak on the A31 amendment, but let me just say, we are literally repeating the exact same mistake that has resulted in a giant dig north of the state office building. The exact same mistake, the exact same intentional mistake. Whether it was last year, but I think it was actually 2 years ago when the DFL House majority moved to expand the state office building and waste north of $500 million and maybe up to $730 million on a grotesque expansion of the state office building. What the DFL majority did at that time was they put these very specific specifications around the exact parcel of land, on the exact geographic location, on the exact dates at which said structure had been built, to the point where the DFL House majority couldn't even include fixes to our own parking garage. But you know what we could do? We could open up the checkbook and create a $730 million monstrosity of a palace for politicians.
Point of order.
State your point of order.
Masons 101, Madam Speaker, debate should be confined to the matter before the body. I'm not sure what Representative Schultz is going on about, but it definitely doesn't have to do with misclassification of workers.
Representative Schultz, if you could tie your argument of a building across the street to the topic at hand, please do so, and you still have the floor.
Gladly. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Point of order.
State your point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Under Mason, Section 80, the purpose of debate, number 1, the exchange of thought is through debate. Each member has the right to present his thoughts, her thoughts, and opinions and to argue and attempt to convince the other members of the group. So go along with your latitude and make your argument and your debate.
Representative Kresha, I would be the one to state that, as I am the presiding officer, not you. So I will give Representative Schultz the floor back. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What we're working with here is a lot of unintended consequences of the language that we put inside of bills. And to the point that has been made by members of the Republican side of the aisle who are trying to avoid unintended consequences that could be very, very damaging to the state of Minnesota, to the availability for rideshare services, in addition to the concern over fraud, waste, and abuse, we need to adopt language like Representative New Brindley has before us. And as much as my friend Representative Hollins wants to think that this is directly about worker misclassification, what we're trying to do here is ensure that we are talking about independent contractors. Though I'm sure we would love a hearty debate on House File 4444 and allow for Representative Greenman's true time in the sun. But to get back to the point where we have a bill before us that would create a very narrow lens over a specific nonprofit, we need to make sure that we're avoiding the unintended consequences of language like this, because it is very similar. The language of this underlying bill is so similar to the grotesque palace for politicians. But please support Representative New Brindley's A19 amendment, or RA24-019 amendment. Thank you, Representative New Brindley.
I recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Representative New, I am really liking your amendment here. Members, independent contractors. Did you know that the IRS has a definition of an independent contractor? It says that the general rule is that an individual is an independent contractor if the payer has the right to control or direct only the result of work and not what will be done and how it will be done. Members, if a rider or driver of a rideshare program does not like the terms of the employment, the terms of the contract or the terms of the job, doesn't like to set their own hours, members, you are free, they are free to find another job, another rideshare program. I guess as of May 16th, NPR reported that a brand new rideshare app arrived in Minnesota. WIDS, I think that's how we pronounce it. WIDS launches. This amendment is extremely important. Members, we do not need the heavy-handed hand of government coming to save us each and every time. Or in this case, right now, you know who's running this place? The majority rule right now, it's coming from Minneapolis and one senator. So Minneapolis and one senator is driving this bill. Let me say that again. It is not organic. The legislative process was kind of hijacked yesterday. Minneapolis and one senator. That's who's controlling this. That's who's controlling this. So members, I'm going to ask you to vote for a green vote for the Ann New Brindley amendment. We cannot, if you do not know how to go look for a job, I can help you if you do not care for working for Lyft or Uber anymore. If you don't like how it's operating, you are free to go out into the workplace and find a different job. You are free to do that. Nobody is forcing you to stay with Uber or Lyft, or in this case, maybe it's WIDS. I don't know. Is WIDS included in this bill? We don't even know that. But Madam Speaker, I'm asking members to vote green. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Hussein. Further discussion to the New Brindley Amendment. To the author of the amendment, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the support. You know, I was struck by some of the comments that Representative Greenman said it's a sweet deal. It's a sweet deal for these employers to not have to pay all this stuff. Well, you know what else is a sweet deal? When you get to set your own hours, when you have all of your own flexibility, when you get to do whatever you want. It's a sweet deal, which is why people choose the gig economy. But you don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to say, I want the sweet deal of everything that comes with being an employee, but I also want to retain the sweet deal of all the flexibility that I want, working when I want, working where I want, taking what rides I want, denying what rides I want. You don't get to have it all. That's not how the world works. As Representative Franson said, you know what? Our unemployment rate in Minnesota is extraordinarily low. There are a ton of jobs. If you want traditional employment, if you want to work for an employer and receive the benefits of working for an employer, my 20-year-old daughter got back from college. She applied for a job on Saturday. She had the job on Monday and was trained on Thursday. And let me tell you, she's working at McDonald's. She's making over $17 an hour. She is earning PTO. She's got a 401k. There are plenty of traditional employment jobs available if that's what you're looking for and if that's what you want. But if you want the flexibility of being a gig worker, well, then you also have the responsibility of being a gig worker. You don't get it both ways. You don't get it both ways. I mean, imagine what a sweet deal that is, that you get all the benefits of everything. That's nonsense. That is absolutely nonsense. So, since the legislature is now managing labor negotiations, frankly, there's no need. There's no need to have any risk that rideshare drivers will fall under misclassification. Since we're doing the labor negotiations, there's no need to risk that they will fall under this new statute. So let's make sure that we are protecting flexibility, that we are protecting the benefits of being a gig worker that these folks have clearly chosen, that we, frankly, protect the negotiations that this body has done for them. And let's vote yes on this amendment. Madam Speaker, I just verify I did ask for a roll call?
You did ask for a roll call.
Oh, thank heavens. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The clerk will take the roll. Representative Greenman, since you spoke in the bill, did you want to vote too? The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
There you go.
Carroll, no.
Carroll, no.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 yeas and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Franzen moves to amend House File Number 4746, the second engrossment, as amended. The amendment is coded A47.
I recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franzen.
Madam Speaker, can you give me a moment? Because I don't even know if I have that amendment at my desk here.
Great system.
There it is. Yeah, I keep getting skipped over here. All right. Yes, this is an important one. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is an easy vote. Green. Members, so this amendment says, as director of the Drivers Advocacy Organization contracted under this subdivision cannot have been convicted of fraud or been the recipient of an adverse administrative action related to a finding that the organization has committed fraud. Members, as we know that this bill has already been conferenced, and I did not see any comfort language in this bill, the one that we're debating today, 360, and I'm not sure if that is the same language, this A24 language that we're debating today that is going to be voted on shortly here in the Transportation Conference Committee. But with that said, it is important that we do our due diligence and that we don't have a conversation later on down the road that says, I told you so. Members, we have a major fraud problem in Minnesota, not just fraud, but also waste and abuse. All throughout my terms here in the legislature, we have had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud in our public programs. If it's not Medicaid, if it's not transportation services, if it's not our child care assistance program, or if it's not through the food program, which famously is called Feed Our Futures. I like to refer to it as Feed Our Fraud. So members, we want to make sure that we do our due diligence, and it is especially concerning that we have the Somali Community Resettlement Services, which is probably the organization that will be part of this bill under the subdivision 4, the driver advocacy organizations, but I'm sure it is just the Somali Community Resettlement Services, and that nonprofit has been mentioned in Feeding Our Futures, as in reported in the Reformer. So members, I'm very concerned here, members, that we are doing this bill basically without any public input. We're not getting testimony, and we aren't thoroughly vetting the issues with giving money to nonprofits. We also have, we know that there's some issues with not just Feeding Our Future, but quite a few nonprofits here in Minnesota. So members, I'm going to ask you to vote green on this, and thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, fraud, waste, abuse is all bad. Vote for this amendment.
Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
I agree. I'm writing that down. Fraud, waste, abuse is all bad. That's exactly right. So thank you, Representative Franzen, for this amendment. And I think this one is particularly interesting because it's actually pretty narrow in scope. This isn't necessarily that the organization itself has been engaged in fraud, but when it came to the Feeding Our Future scandal, it was really interesting when you started putting different stories together. You started seeing names from Feeding Our Future that we had seen a few years before in the CCAP fraud. The exact same people were popping up in both of those stories, in both of those cases of fraud. So what we know, it's not just a single organization that may be problematic. There are problematic people who engage in fraudulent activity over and over and over again and try to find the new hole in the dam that they can exploit for their own personal gain. And it is all wrong. Fraud, waste, and abuse is all bad. I'm super excited that we are all finally going to put up a green vote for agreeing that all fraud, waste, and abuse is bad. So this is specific to individual people as opposed to organizations. And it ensures that if someone has been engaged in fraud, either convicted of fraud or the recipient of an adverse administrative action relating to a finding that an organization committed fraud, which means that the fraud was not necessarily committed directly by that person. It may have been by the organization, but the individual had an adverse administrative action. Well, we should ensure that those folks do not get to be directors of a driver's advocacy organization that's going to be receiving, man, who knows how much money, mandated by the state to go to these nonprofit organizations. Let's make sure that a director has no association with committing fraud. Because again, this is what we see. The same names in the CCAP fraud are the exact same people who showed up in the Feeding Our Future fraud. This is a racket. It's a scam. It is a profession for some people committing fraud. It is clearly a profession. And we owe it to folks to make sure that we're doing everything we can to put guardrails in place when it comes to these drivers advocacy organizations that are going to receive a little windfall from a private company. Good amendment. Thank you, Representative Franson.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm so glad to hear the words from a member of the majority party saying they want to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And the good opportunity is there's a whole bunch of conference committee reports that have not been fully passed or sent to the governor yet, and there's a lot more that we can be doing during the remaining 8+ hours left of this legislative session. And so, members, I would just encourage us, let's focus upon the biggest waste of money that's across the street. We can insert some language, we can put a stop to that. It's in a dig right now, we can cancel that. We can get back to what Minnesotans expect of us, which is to make Minnesota more affordable rather than the unaffordable and irresponsible expansion of the state office building.
Further discussion to the Franson amendment. There being no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Oh, apologies, Representative Franson. To the author of the amendment, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd like a roll call too, please, Madam Speaker.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing either 15 hands, seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Well, members, I'm actually very excited that we can get it on the record that we are about to vote that for waste, fraud, and abuse is all bad. Let me say that again. Waste, fraud, abuse is all bad. Yes, it is. It is all bad. So today, I hope that we have a green vote on this. And I'm super excited. I'm really excited about this because, you know, I don't even remember what year it was. Was it 2018, 2017, 2019? But when the $100 million disappeared from the Child Care Assistance Program, remember that? Fox 9 news article, it was terrible, absolutely terrible. But you know, the Department of Human Services didn't want to actually believe it was $100 million in fraud. They didn't want to believe. There was allegations of money being laundered to terrorist organizations overseas. And of course, the Department of Human Services didn't really want to believe that. And the OLA report couldn't quite substantiate that. However, they did found that in the OLA report, they found federal regulatory and law enforcement agencies are concerned that terrorist organizations in certain countries, including Somalia, obtain and use money sent from the United States by immigrants and refugees to family and friends in those countries. And we do know that to be true in the case of feeding our future, feeding our fraud, where money ended up overseas for lavish lifestyles, homes, yachts. Oh, I think somebody bought a Porsche. I read that. So members, it's actually, I'm just thrilled that we're going to vote. And I'm just so interested in how this process is going to play out. So we're going to pass this bill with all these wonderful amendments. And isn't it shocking that it's the last day of session, members, and we have, what do we have left here? We have 9 hours, 28 minutes, and 8 hours, 23 minutes, and 19 seconds. My I have a stopper now, so now I know exactly down to the seconds. But isn't it something? 8 hours, 23 minutes, 9 seconds to get to the point where we are working in a bipartisan manner. I have never seen so many green votes on a board when Republicans are offering amendments. It is absolutely beautiful. But maybe that's only because of the fact that the bill's already done and it's just waiting to be taken up to adopt the conference committee report. But aside from all that, I'm very curious to see how these Republican amendments are going to play out at the end of session and how we're going to be able to incorporate the language we are going to be adopting today into the conference committee when it comes to the House floor on a conference committee report that we will not be able to amend. So I'm learning, members. We're all learning. Maybe there's a new rule we don't know about and we're about to learn today. So members, please vote yes. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 130 yeas and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Joy moves to amend House Bill number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded RA24-017.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Clay, Representative Joy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment is a friendly amendment, and it looks like with the way the board is, we're winning right now. They're actually going with this, so I wonder what's going on. What this amendment will do is take the fees that they negotiated, the great fees, and take it from 2027 to 2035 and just keep them locked in. So we don't have to sit on this floor, debate this over the next 10 years. It just continues the rate in. Otherwise, we're going to sit here every year, have to renegotiate. So this amendment is a simple amendment. It just keeps that rate that they had a great negotiation and everybody came to agreement on, and it will keep it locked in until 2035. I appreciate a green vote. Thank you.
Discussion to the Joy amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think the date on that, on the 2027, is the date that the increment based on inflation will start. meaning that we are going to start the inflation rate increase at that point, so I don't understand the purpose of 2035. This is not a sunset. It's the beginning of the increasing the rates for the driver based on inflation. Please vote no on this amendment.
Further discussion to the Joy Amendment. I recognize the member from Sibley, Representative Harder. Oh, Representative Harder is not looking to be recognized. Unfortunate timing. There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend House File Number 4746, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded RA24-020.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. We are back to the A20 amendment. I had started to talk about the A20 amendment earlier. And again, the point of this one is on page 13 of the bill. In the driver advocacy organization language, under the language in the bill, the only two requirements of this organization is that it has existed for 2 years and that it's capable of providing culturally competent driver representation services. Those are the only two requirements. However, the problem with that is that by mandating a private company to essentially give a grant to this service, that's essentially what's happening here, without actually going through a government agency to make that happen. But by doing so, we forego all of the safeguards we put in place last year. Safeguards, things like a financial review of the grant and business subsidy recipients, things like requiring financial information and a determination of ability to perform. It considers things like their history of performing duties similar to those required under this program. It requires 990 forms and ensures that they've been filed with the Internal Revenue Service. There's all kinds of requirements to ensure that organizations are fiscally sound. In addition to that, I've also added the 16B.981 language and also the 16B.991 language regarding a termination. That this actually can be terminated if there's a criminal conviction. That this could be immediately terminated if the recipient is convicted of a criminal offense relating to a state grant agreement. And we are talking about an organization that likely does have state grant agreements. It's a nonprofit organization. So if they're convicted of a criminal offense relating to a state grant agreement, these rideshare companies should have the ability to terminate these relationships, these contracts. This is the safety language that Democrats came up with last year to ensure fiscal responsibility and good management of these organizations. We should have those same safeguards in this bill. Madam Speaker, I would request a roll call and a green vote on the amendment.
A roll call has been requested. I do not see 15 hands. There are 15 hands. There will be a roll call. Discussion on the amendment. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please vote green.
Further discussion to the New Brindley A20 amendment. To the author of the amendment, Representative New Brindley. Nope, the clerk will take the roll. Chief Clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. It's like the roll was closed. I think there's like a bunch of. There being 126 yeas and 0 nays, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give this bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 4746, as amended.
Third reading. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we debate this historic agreement between the drivers, the TNC, the House, the Senate, and the governor, it has been a long ride. For far too long, the TNC drivers have been taken for a drive. This bill is centered on supporting those drivers who have come to us for a long time to make sure that they get fair pay, they're treated with dignity and respect, that they have a living wage. As this compensation in this bill, the minimum compensation is about 20% increase. Members, this is a historic increase that has not happened anywhere in the country. We understand the challenges when large corporations take advantage of low-income individuals, when the CEOs of big corporations are making millions, and yet the drivers are paid pennies. This is centering on those drivers and making sure that they've got a take-home that can guarantee them that they can have that American dream. So with this historical agreement that we have seen unfold since last night, it's time for us to make sure no worker in the state of Minnesota is treated differently, to make sure that their benefits, their compensation is up to par of what we believe that someone who is going to pay for their rent, to pay for food, to pay for shelter, they're able to afford. So I'll ask you all, please vote green. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
I recognize the member from Stearns, Representative Damuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, as we get ready to take a vote on this, this bill, I just want to remind everyone why we are here. And the reason we are here debating this bill is because of the Minneapolis Democrat City Council. That is the only reason that we have had to have this discussion here, was because of the Minneapolis City Council. The other thing is, we actually had an answer for this 2 months ago or more. Representative Engen had a bill that would have had preemption, it would have taken care of the issue, it would have already done what this last-minute, last deal did. We could have solved this issue 2 months ago. The other reason that we're here is what was at risk. Minneapolis, the City Council, was at risk of canceling 400,000 rides per week, and they had at risk $400,000 per day of earnings. That was what was at risk. We know that there's been a conference committee that was already wrapped, that was going to have this information in it. And as we heard from the majority leader just a little while ago, the only reason we are going through the motions of hearing this bill in the House is to prevent a question and a fight on rules. Well, members in the House of Representatives, regardless of the time and the lateness of when things actually come to us, I still think the rules should be followed. If you take out your yellow rules book, I just want to remind you of why it was important to actually hear this bill. Rule 6.4, it says, a conference committee report must include only subject matter contained in the House or Senate versions of the bill for which the conference committee was appointed, or like subject matter contained. That means, members, that there had to have been a bill heard in the House or Senate before we could just airdrop it right into a conference committee. And that is what we were doing. While we were getting started on this bill, that conference committee met, and we found out while we were still debating it, so there is no bill yet, they wrapped that conference committee with these provisions. But Madam Speaker, would Representative Petersburg yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Petersburg, I understand that you served on the conference committee in which this provision was dropped in. Is that correct?
Representative Petersburg.
That is correct.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, if Representative Petersburg would yield again.
He will yield. Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Petersburg, thank you for your work and your diligence on this. I appreciate the effort that you have made. We just in this body approved 12 amendments to this bill. Representative Petersburg, were all 12 of those amendments already included in the bill that has been airdropped into the conference committee report?
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you for that question, Madam Speaker, and for Minority Leader. No, they were not. We had one amendment that we'd already passed and had accepted before the conference committee met. And I had inquired about whether or not shouldn't we at least include that, since we know it had already been passed. And the debate was no, because conference committees can take it out whenever they want. But I said, but that's after the bill is actually get in place. Now, I've been in the minority for experience 8 years, 4 years in the majority, and it's true that the majority has the votes to do whatever they want. And so the minority really doesn't have an awful lot of work. But what we've always been able to rely on as a minority is the process. The process is what really delves into what we can and cannot do. And this is one of the examples in which if we had taken the bill as if it had been passed here, the way it would have been passed here, and then taken all that stuff out in conference, that would have been correct. But in this case, there was an assumption to take it as if we didn't. They didn't even offer a DE that would have had it all in place as well. Instead, they just outvoted me. So it was 8-1 against me, and actually including any of these amendments that were approved.
Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Petersburg, thank you for telling us exactly what took place in that conference committee. And this is absolutely disingenuous. We were told that the only reason we had to hear this bill was just to satisfy the minority, so they wouldn't give us a hard time in the question on if this was actually following proper House rules. This was not a serious process, yet it is a very serious bill. There were 12 amendments that this body, almost unanimously, just approved to be added to this bill. But as you heard from one of the conferees, those amendments did not matter. The work that we do in this place does not matter. You can do whatever you want when you're in the majority, but you have to follow the process. Like I said, we could have had this issue handled weeks ago. It didn't have to wait for the very last hours. It needed a full debate. Clearly, there are some very definite concerns with some of the provisions that are in here. And I understand when process is avoided and deals are made and not everyone is included. But is it the right thing for Minnesota? Saving Uber and Lyft is the right thing for Minnesota. The way that it was done and what is included in here has some definite concerns. It was not the right process. I know we're going to vote on this, but yet I have to wonder, when that conference committee comes up before us, I think we will have a long debate whether or not we would accept that conference committee because of the process and the way that it was done. This is incredibly frustrating that we had to do this just to satisfy the minority, but yet the majority didn't think to take it seriously. Members, vote your conscience on this. Vote whichever way you want, because we'll have an opportunity to vote on the process in just a little bit. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, the author of the bill, Representative Hassan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, for the debate. A lot has been said, some accurate statements, some very inaccurate statements, and we have focused on the wrong thing about this bill. We've been talking about feeding our future and fraud and waste and abuse, and this has nothing to do with this bill. This bill is about protection for workers. It's about fair pay. It's about making sure that our workers are not exploited. I want to thank the drivers for being here the second year in a row. Thank you. Your advocacy and tenacity is why we're here today. I also want to thank our nonpartisan staff, Martha James and Mary Davis, who have maybe worked on this bill on many, many hours, and also, I don't know what the number is, but printed many, many versions of this bill. I also want to give my biggest gratitude to Paul Cumming, who without him, this bill would not have been possible. Thank you, Leader Long, for your advocacy, for your commitment to workers. Thank you, members. This bill is about fair wages, protection for workers, and striking balance between drivers and TNC companies. This bill is about making sure that everyone has a bite of the apple. It's a compromise between all stakeholders. I think that for the last maybe few weeks, we have heard from all members in here, whichever side of the aisle you're at, that we should not let Uber and Lyft leave the state of Minnesota because it's a crucial service that our communities need. Our communities people in the disability community use this. Our elders use this. Even, these days, young people, students are using it when they miss the bus. Imagine if Uber and Lyft leave. How many people will be stuck at the airport? How many people would not have this service? How many people will not be able to get groceries? How many people will not be able to do what they need to do? I am very proud of the work that we have done on this bill. I'm hearing that, the proper channels have not been followed. This bill we didn't do the work. Well, guess what? We did do the work. This bill went through the committee process. We have taken amendments. We have debated this bill. We've talked about it. We have brought every stakeholder at the table so we can strike a balance, and that is what we did. It's a pretty damn good bill. Vote green.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Will the clerk please call the name of the member voting remotely?
Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 71 ayes and 59 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.